and ate out of their buffet yesterday. A little while later, but I don't know.
Uh-oh.
I'm good.
Ah,
I'm good. That's an old story. Let's have a new one.
all right. Well,
How
man, I
wa-
love the new album, Triage.
Thank you, man. I
Pretty
appreciate
powerful songwriting, man.
it. Yeah, thank you.
I mean, that
Yeah.
the title song alone, that's an epic. That's really quite a song.
Yeah, well, I worked on them. I mean, I worked on them with a different. I was thinking of, a thing I was going to be talking to you. I was thinking about, in the early turn of the century when I was making Fate's Right Hand and The Outsider, I sort of, it was, they're somehow related, but the creating then, the writing and making the record was this kind of, I want to get this out there because I have to, I, because I want to say this. That's what it is. I want to say this, and I want people to hear it. And I think on this, when I started writing these songs that are triage, it was, I really need to do this, and whether anybody hears it or not, and which led me to the mindset of like I'm gonna work on these songs until I've brought them, because I was really reaching up into the upper ethers for a lot of this,
Mhm.
but I was keenly aware that to bring it down here on the earth, I had to really make the language really grounded, as spiritual or otherworldly or universal love oriented it all might be. If I didn't get it grounded, really grounded, and I wouldn't be doing my job. And I also sense that if I really got it grounded, that it might work for people who aren't on the particular path that I've been on, most of my life.
What do you mean when you say grounded, and in what way?
That uh, the language had to be solid enough, earth, earthy enough that you could relate to the language. I mean, and that's why in some places I went back to the Bible and pulled some scripture that spoke a language that people, you know, that some people are comfortable with, or if even if not comfortable, in some sense used to. So by grounded, I think I mean relatable language
Mhm.
because I'm not necessarily exploring easily relatable topics. When you think about love between man, boy, and girl love, I mean, that's an easy trade-off to make with a audience or a listener. But when you're talking about universal love, when you're talking about God love, or an elevated kind of love that's not really about physical bodies, you got to be careful. You need to be careful.
That's
Or,
the
or
album ends with that too, that you're not only your body, right?
yeah, yeah. So I mean, in a long-winded way of saying that, I really took the job of writing these songs as more seriously than I've ever taken uh, the prospect of writing an album, of seeing an album I want to make coming into view and finishing it and getting it there. It was, it may be age, it may be just that I've reached a point where, the mining of the source has to come from way down there somewhere, in order for it to be new.
It's surprising to hear you say that you were more serious because you've always seemed like such a serious artist. And having gone to your last camp I was so inspired that you really stressed the artistry of songwriting. Before you learn how to write a hit song, learn the artistry of the thing.
Yeah.
And that's what you represent to us, the artistry of songwriting.
Well, thank you for saying that. And if indeed that's true, which I hope it is, and sometimes suspect it is, then I've at least matched up with, the Mickey Newberry and Townes Van Zandt and Guy Clark's that got me when I was at my most impressionable beginning, and didn't so much show me as just let me observe their process. And I had great admiration for it, and I didn't want to I didn't want to besmirch it, you know what I mean? It's like, I want to, yeah, okay, I've learned this from these guys. I want to take this out there, and I want to do it as well as I can.
I read a quote. You said when you first met Guy Clark, it was kind of a splash in the face of what real songwriting is about. I started filling my mind with as many symbols and images as I could. I started reading. I got real hungry to have something to contribute.
Yeah, I did
That
start
was
reading.
interesting. It gave you the idea that you need content. You need to bring stuff
Yeah,
in.
definitely realized I needed content. And it started interestingly, I grew up in Texas. I made it, through graduated high school having read only a couple of books. One of them, Young Readers Football Stories, and another biography of Ulysses S. Grant. That and the funny papers was as far as I got. But when I got among professional writers, I was like, ooh, I'm an empty vessel here. I need to fill it up.
What would you read? Do you remember you said you started reading.
I
Where
did.
did you turn?
Hunter Thompson, started in with Hunter Thompson.
Mhm.
And Larry, uh, Tom Robbins, Tom Robbins was kind of in his beginning run with Even Cowgirls and Another Roadside Attraction,
Yeah.
which led me. And then I had a roommate who was a Hemingway devotee who got me into Hemingway.
That was my
And
father's thing, Hemingway.
yeah,
Short sentences, no, fancy words.
yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. Well, you know, a simple declarative sentence. Yeah, well, that's easy for Hemingway to say because he's not trying to write songs post Bob Dylan. So fuck him.
Right. It's not as easy to sing that stuff. Now I know Guy Clark had a big influence. Did Townes Van Zandt have a direct influence?
Yes,
Because
he
I
did.
knew Townes, and he wasn't as disciplined in life as others. What kind of influence did he have?
Towns' influence on me was a, witnessing swagger, first first person swagger. I mean, Towns had a real serious swagger happening, in the early '70s. I mean, he was out, folk singer touring, coming in off the road and kicking heroin and, you know, disappearing upstairs at Amy Martin's house and then finally coming down, after he detoxed from his run and get up and just blow everybody away. I mean, that scene in Bringing It All Back Home when Donovan and Bob Dylan are in some hotel room and
Mhm.
Donovan plays some song, kind of, it's understandable that he was said, "Well, I'm going to sacrifice myself to the gods with this one."
Mhm.
And then Dylan turns around and sings "Crimson Flames Tied to My Ears," whatever it was. It's all over now, baby blue. Whatever it was,
Mhm.
I witnessed Towns doing that to other songwriters on more than a few occasions.
Oh yeah, is that right?
Like, here's my new song, Towns. Yeah, well, here's my new song. Here's Pancho and Lefty.
Doesn't get much better than that. I mean, Pancho and Lefty,
Sure.
classic. I discovered that song on Luxury Line on the Annie Lou Harris album, and "You're Supposed to Be Feeling Good" by You was on that album. And
That's
Both were
true.
just names. And I was thinking, who are these guys? They're writing some great songs. I
Yeah.
loved You're Supposed to Be Feeling Good. That was a great song.
Yeah, it's still in my it's over there on my computer and list of things to do. So, you know, I want to give a shot. I've never recorded it. I want to give a shot at it at some point.
I know it. I looked today that I figured there must be a recording by you, but there isn't.
There isn't.
No. And just the whole attitude of the thing. You're supposed to be feeling good, it's a really interesting attitude
Hmm.
so
How come that?
did you write it for Emmylou?
No, no. It's an interesting story, though, about that, which I learned a valuable lesson in songwriting. I spent a day writing a song tailor-made for Emmy Lou. I was living in California and rang her up and I said, "Oh, okay, I'm all hooked up with Emmy Lou and she's recording my song, so I'll write a song for her." So I went over to her place, and I sat down and I played. I said, "Emmy, I wrote this song for you. See what you think." I played it, and she was like nonplussed. I said, "Well, that's really nice. Hey, by the way, I heard this demo of this song. You're supposed to be feeling good. I want to record that." So I'm a pretty quick study, and I realized, just write the songs, son. Don't try to make them fit something. Just write them. And
That
valuable
seems like good
lesson.
advice because you could kind of limit yourself if you're targeting it too much, right?
Well, yeah, it's like if you put the target ahead of the horse or the carrot or whatever it is,
Mhm.
it's like, then you're trying to tell the song what it needs to be rather than the song telling you what it needs to be. And I'm a firm believer in patience and waiting for the song to tell me what it wants to be. And if I'm patient enough and dedicated enough, eventually it'll tell me. You know,
The essential part of songwriting, isn't it, that you listen to the song? You can't just impose yourself on a song.
yeah, you start imposing yourself on a song, then the ego is a tricky substance, in songwriting. You start imposing your will on the song, and next thing you know, you got a song that's narrow in its scope because you're trying to make it what you think it ought to be rather than what it is.
Yeah. Some of these songs on the new album, they seem very, pointed. The change is going to come. We need to make a change. Were you following the song, or did you come to that song with that message that you wanted to write about that?
That song was the very first thing I started working on. And I first got an inkling that, oh, where am I going? And I wrote on that song in a lot of different ways and wrote pages and pages and pages, threw them out, went looking for them, brought them back in, um, and eventually bailed on the song.
Really?
Yeah, and then I other songs were taking form, Here Goes Nothing and Triage um, and as it started to make sense, and some of the songs that I'd written and recorded and elbowed out of the running order, I realized that some of the songs were overreaching in a way that they weren't quite as comfortable with themselves, nor I with them, as all the songs needed to be as far as I could tell. So I elbowed a few out, and that one kept talking to me, and then I condensed it down from pages and pages and pages and found the way to simplify it
Hmm.
because it was I was making it complex, but I needed to understand other songs that were forming to be on the record for me to circle around and readdress that song and find a way to bring it into the boat.
So when you said
But
you had pages and pages, you mean of verses and lyrics?
yeah, yeah.
Is that how you always do it? Do you always have pages and pages for every song?
Sometimes, you know, uh, sometimes
I
it,
know you
it
love Leonard Cohen. That was certainly his way.
well, yeah, Leonard Cohen would be, probably my audience of one for Triage. Were he alive, and if and he not being alive, then okay, even more so. But uh, the last couple of last starting with waiting for the miracle to come from his live revival down through come healing and you want it darker. The work that he was doing really spoke to me in a real deep way in that when I'm inspired by another artist, I don't want to try to copy them or mock, or to be like them, but what I want to do is access in myself what it is I see in them, or where I think I see them going to get hold of what they're bringing back and making into songs, like Come Healing. Or, I could, go all the way back to Bob Dylan's Every Grain of Sand, or I and I. Those those pieces of work, it's like, you know, do I have any access to my version of that? You know?
Well, Triage had that kind of expansive feel of every grain of sand, where you're really in your own turf there, and it's an expansive song.
Yeah, well, good. Well, songs, Paul, and if you say that, I'm gonna dine out a little later on your words.
You should.
But thank you for saying it, because I'm not at liberty to say, but I can say that I put in the work, that if it's going to stand, if it had a chance of standing, I put in the work to make it stand. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, it's interesting when you call it work, and yet what you're doing is really listening and trying to find out what's supposed to be there. It's an unusual kind of work. It's not like building a normal thing.
Yeah, it is. It is. It is. How do you, the work is waiting.
How long to finish Triage? How long did you work on that one?
Oh, I started it was probably a year and a half to 2 years of writing. I mean, I'd already started writing it when I made uh, the album that's just called Texas,
Mhm.
which was an entirely different kind of I thought of that album as landscape paintings, really, in a way, and that's the way I went about enjoying the process of writing those songs. But as I started to work on, and actually when Something Has a Change came aboard, and by the time I'd finished Texas, I was so far into Triage that I was out on tour performing, you know, behind that album, and my heart and my mind was on this one. I suppose that's not unusual for people, who do what I do to.
Did Triage have pages and pages and pages as well?
Yeah, yeah, I have a notebook with, 8 or 10 pages of Triage.
I think that's the only way you could write a song like that. You couldn't just sit down and do that, and
Well, I started down in somewhere in the Caribbean. My wife were down in there, and I just had a notebook, and I started just writing verses and verses and verses,
mm,
and pages and pages and pages of verses. And when I got back here to my studio and started to tinker with it, then then I got out a real notebook and went to work on it, which I love. I honestly love the work and the processes. God, all the horror and pain, and I lost my closest relative, my cousin who I grew up with. I lost him to COVID
mm.
in January. And for all the pain and sorrow, lockdown suited me just fine.
It's good for
Because
songwriters because you're used to isolation and a chance to work.
yeah, yeah.
I thought it
Social,
was very.
I've been socially distancing my whole life.
I thought it was really touching. And one of the great things about your camp was that Joe Henry was there, who I love, and he's just
Hmm.
such a brilliant
Yeah.
guy. And I noticed you had mentioned him in the liner notes when you were talking about triage. Uh,
Triage.
what he
Yeah.
went through inspired that.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Joe inspired that. And I was writing that song, if not for Joe, at Joe. It's like certainly Triage, Joe was my audience of one for that song. And as I was pulling it because when Joe faced his health crisis with the cancer and was so vulnerable and so open and so brave and so inspiring that there's not an ounce of denial in that man. So I mean, when we would talk, he would open up, just about how frightening and how real it was and how he was struggling to remain himself, and how he was reaching for to quote Steve Winwood and Will Jennings, a higher love. And so yeah, I was shooting those arrows at Joe for sure.
Uh,
And since it was for Joe, it was really important that I did the job well because I've made several records with Joe. He's produced several records,
mhm.
and I love making records with Joe because it it gives me great pleasure to please him with the that I give. All the albums that I've made with Joe, I sang every note on the records live in the studio because I'm shooting at Joe. Here it is, Joe. I'm gonna sing my ass off for you, brother,
Well,
more than anybody that I can think of. And so the song at Joe was sort of the same coming from the same place.
it's interesting to hear it from that side because I know the records are so great. But I figure, a big part of a great producer is how he works with the artist and makes an artist feel comfortable. And you really want to make Joe happy, when you're working with him.
Want to make him happy. Yeah, love to make.
Kind of freeze. Come back. No, there you are. I lost you for a second.
Yeah, my internet asked for me to change it. I did. Yeah,
Well, we talk about Joe and Leonard Cohen. I mean, Leonard, when he was dying the last year of his life, he wrote that amazing album. And
yeah.
Joe wrote The Gospel According to Water. I think that's some of the greatest songs he's ever written. It really
Hmm.
shows you a songwriter. I think they might be going out, so they write more songs.
Well, my song on Triage, uh, Transient Global Amnesia Blues.
Mhm.
It's the last song that I wrote on the album for the album, and I had a session booked to record another song, uh, and I had an arranging session with Jed Hughes and Joe Robinson, and we were going to record it the next day. And Joe and Jed were coming over, so I went out, took my walk. I walked in the hills around here, and then came back and did a little exercise. Went in to make a cup of tea to get ready for the guys, and the next thing I know, I wake up in an MRI at the nearby hospital, and I left town. I had no idea where I was. I have a vague memory of my wife Claudia walking me outside to get some air, and I have a vague memory of being in the passenger seat going somewhere. Then I woke up in the MRI and I went, oh God, I hate our MRIs. And luckily I just spaced back out and then woke up in the emergency room. And I had been diagnosed with this thing called transient global amnesia, which is a rare thing, but happens, at least in they say they get 2 cases a month at the hospital near me. And basically you just have amnesia for 6 hours or so. And so I had to stay over in the hospital. So I Claudia was going to come back and get some things for me. And I said, be sure and get my notebook. I need to be able to write something down. I don't know what, but I'm going to need to write something down. And so she came back with my notebook and went on. And the next morning, my daughter texted me a photograph of a sunflower going on a raft on the Thames River in the mid 50s. And there it was. There was the window into where I was going. And so I started writing about that, and and the interesting thing about it is that my brain was so scrambled. It was like my brain was more or less unknown to me. I had very little understanding of myself in relation to what had just happened. But I wasn't afraid of it, and I really was. That's the reason I wanted my notebook. I thought, I may have an opportunity to engage with wherever my brain is right
Typical songwriter. This is a chance for a
now.
different kind of song, right?
Yeah, and so I remembered Jung uh, talking about the first dream that you can remember in your life will have great significance. I was reading Jung when I first discovered Jung and was reading all of his stuff. That one stuck with me. And it came to me out of the amnesia. It came to me that the first dream I ever remember, mind you, I was drugged to a Pentecostal church in east side of Houston where it was pretty heavy religion. And my first dream I ever remember is I'm running alongside Jesus Christ, and I purposely took the spear in my side. So maybe that might say that my life was going to be about I was going to be have some kind of martyr complex. But that dream came screaming back at me, and I said, "Oh boy, here's something I can use." And that's just the way that whole song came together. I had it written in a couple of days. Had canceled the session. I was going to record the other song, and then that was on a. It's funny. It was on. That all happened on John Lennon's birthday, October 9th. I remember. That's the last thing I remember about that day.
His 80th birthday, right?
Would have been, I guess. Um, and there it was. I had this song, and we recorded it right here where I'm sitting. And I said, okay, now that other song wasn't what was really going to finish this album. This is the song that's going to finish it.
So you had complete amnesia where you didn't know who you were for a while?
Not a clue.
Wow.
My wife Claudia thought I was having a stroke of some kind, and it was the night. The hiking trails around my place here, we call it the Loop. And when I asked her if I'd walk the Loop the 9th time, she hurried me into the car and sped me off, thinking, oh, he's having a stroke. It's scared the shit out of her. I was happy as a bird in a tree. I didn't know what was going on.
But was there a moment when you remembered who you were?
Yeah, yeah. It started coming back to me, and next time I woke up in the emergency room, they started asking me questions, and I answered the same answer a bunch of times, but I gave them my name, my age, and the year it was, and they pronounced it transient global amnesia, and I left the hospital happy ever after
Wow. Yeah, you said it was a
with
benign
with a
amnesia.
good song.
You got a song out of it. That's a classic song, right? No matter what happened, you get a song out of it, right?
Yes, sir, boy. It's like I don't know that I'd volunteer for that particular process again. And if there were a drug that I could take that would scramble my brain to where I could write like that all the time, I probably would. Uh, you know, because it was like, oh man, I got a brand new brain to work with. This is good.
And that was good. I would think the brain you have would be really good for songwriting.
Well, that new one was exceptionally good for a few days, you know. Eventually, I was back to working with the same old neurons, you know.
When you were saying how much of the songwriting is work, a lot of it is, what you think is talent. That you have a gift for that. I mean, not everyone can listen to a song and hear words and music, hear music and words. So it's a specific kind of talent, don't you think?
Yes, I have a talent for melody. Melodies come to me pretty good and pretty swiftly, and sometimes with some originality, you know. Uh, but I learned a long time ago that, you know, words, you know, lyrics can come in flashes of lightning, and it's a matter of can you get it all with when that first bolt of lightning happens. And oftentimes, as a young songwriter, I'd get half, two-thirds, three-quarters of a song, and then spend a long time trying to cobble together something to finish off the song that wasn't as good as that first burst. But when it became work is when I knew that no matter that I'd reached an age where those bolts of lightning were not going to be handed out so easily that, you know, wherever inspiration comes from and whoever's mining that store, they'll be checking out, hey, there's this guy, Rodney, you know, he works at this day in and day out. His work ethic is good. Let's send him a little dose of it and see what he gets, you know, and see if he can make it happen. So inspiration comes, you know, to those who work at it. The older you get, if you're not willing to work for it, I don't those bursts aren't going to come.
Because
You
it's
know
one
that
thing, we know a lot of people wrote great songs in their 20s and their youth, but to keep writing great songs throughout your life, that's more unusual.
I
And
wrote
you
some.
said you love it. I think that's the key to it. You love doing it. So that's the thing you love,
I do. I
you
do.
know,
I do. I love
choosing
it.
songs.
I do love it. And I wrote some fine pieces of music in my 20s, and some of them were, you know, bursts of inspiration. You know, and sometimes a few times I got it all. Sometimes I got part of it and cobbled the rest of it together. Sometimes I missed it all together. More or less these days, you know, if I continue working day in and day out, I'll generally find the inspiration in the work rather than in the well, the work is the gift, you know, for in youth, the inspiration from on high, the bolt of lightning was the gift. But eventually at some indeterminable point, the work becomes the gift. And I think that when I realized that the actual work was the gift from here on out, I think I became a better songwriter. Maybe not, maybe not more relatable, maybe not in the broad stroke love song commercial sense, but I became a better songwriter. And that sustained me, and that's when I fell in love with the gig, because it wasn't so much about fame and fortune anymore. It was more about a good day's work.
Mm. And Carole King said a similar thing, that it's about the doing, but loving the writing of the song more than anything else.
Yeah, it is. That it
Uh,
is.
and you're talking about melody, you definitely have a great, gift for melody. And melody in songs is a pretty important thing. A lot of songs we hear that they're not that melodic anymore, but like "Don't Leave Me Now," when you get to that chorus, that's a classic melody and a classic kind of chorus.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
it's a love of song structure too. This is chorus. You really, obviously have a mastery of all that, but then the melody just takes it to the next place.
Yeah, interesting thing about Don't Leave Me Now is that to me, I was writing that song. That's a prayer, you know, for me. I mean, you might listen to it and think uh, uh, you know, like you cross the line with a loved one, but I told a lie, and I figured I was going to get busted for it. And so the song was about, um, you know, self-respect. It's like it was a cry out to the cosmos. It's like, don't give up on me now. You know, I screwed this up. I screwed the pooch on this, but I'm but trust me, I'm going to learn a serious lesson from this. And I did. And that's the reason that's what I was trying to get at with the song, and the reason I just started with it. I said, let's just get the lie out of the way, and get to the truth.
Hmm. You wrote with John Leventhal, hymn 43.
Mm-hmm.
And we talk about Leonard Cohen, it's such a holy nature to some of his songs, or Every Grain of Sand has that too. And that
Yeah.
certainly has that feeling.
Yeah. Well, that song came to be. I called John uh, up and I said, "Hey, John, do you have any melodies?" I said, "I want to get away from my melody. You got some? You got any melodies that are or write a melody?" And he says, he says, "I'm tinkering around with the idea of hymns." I said, "Send me one." So John sent me down that, a verse, chorus, guitar part, and I wrote the lyric and recorded it, and then just sent my performance back to John. COVID was on by then, and John took it from there. He played everything else on it, and then I said, I I I I brag about, I introduced John to his wife Roseanne, and I take great pride in that, and their son uh, is a beautiful, lovely songwriter and performance, Jake Leventhal. I said, so do me a favor, John, get Roseanne and Jake on this, and I said, I'll be really happy with whatever you want to do with it, but get them on, and that's how it came back.
It's a beautiful song. Why is it number 43?
Well, John and I were talking about that, and I was out in the garden, and we were talking. And he said, "Well, what do you want to call it?" We said some kind of hymn name. I said, "Why don't we just call it hymn number 43?" Because they're usually on a page. They turn the page to hymn number 68 or what. So we might have gotten farther away from some of the famous numbered things if we had gotten up into hymn number 121 or something. We stayed down there in the 40s, and when I said that, John said, "Oh yeah, that's good title."
Is that unusual to ask someone else for a melody and then write to the melody like that?
It's not unusual with John and I. We've done it before, and most of the songs that I wrote with Will Jennings, interesting thing about my relationship, and Will and I wrote several big old hit songs, and Will was known as a lyricist, and Steve Winwood and take your pick, movie score writers, they would get Will to write lyrics, but Will wrote lovely melodies. So early on in our collaboration, Will said he showed me a melody, and I wrote some words to it, and he liked it. He was happy, and from then on, he anytime he got a melody, he would send it to me and say, "Man, you're the only person that'll listen to my melodies. Please remember me." That big chorus was Will's melody. Uh, oh God, "Many a Long and Lonesome Highway."
Does he
That
give you
was
a tape where he's just singing the melody?
Yeah, I would just get Will playing something on some guitar or something, and he wouldn't even bother with words. Because he was all the time writing words. So all of our collaborations, um, I wrote most of the words to most of his melody.
I found that that kind of collaboration is the hardest when you write words to a melody, because as we say, you can't impose it. It really has to fit in every way. You can't just say this is what it's going to be about. You have to really find what works there, right?
Yeah, well, which is one of the reasons why you got to be really careful whose melodies you you know choose to collaborate with. Certainly, uh, Will never missed with me, and John and I have written quite a few songs, and I don't know that he ever missed, or I never. Who's to say which ones? I always seem to be able to come up with something to go with his melody.
How do you do that when you have a melody? Do you play it yourself on guitar?
I'll eventually learn it and play it on the guitar myself. Learn and play it the way I feel it, and then come back to. Most of the times, I'm gonna wind up singing the song myself, so I'll pretty much take their melody more into my comfort zone. Certainly with Will, that was almost always the case. With the case of hymn number 43, it was um, that's John's melody right down. Every nuance of that melody is John's. I just happened to find the words to fit it.
Does John also sing his melodies, or does he play them for you?
He played it. It was a guitar melody that he
Hmm.
sent me.
Wow. Yeah, I love this on The Girl on the Street. That's a wonderful song. And I love the tempo change. It is so unexpected and cool.
Yeah. Well, it actually happened. I was in San Francisco. I think, hardly strictly bluegrass time in San Francisco, and I'm walking, and beautiful young woman approaches me on the street, wanting money. And she was obviously jonesing for dope, and you know, I looked at her and I thought, oh wow, beautiful, beautiful young woman, somebody's daughter. I have daughters her age, and but I reached in my pocket and I handed her 45 cents, and she kind of was disappointed in that, and I was sort of disappointed in myself as I walked away. And it haunted me because I was thinking, shit, I could have taken her over and bought her something good to eat. It's on the streets. I could have bought her a good meal and gave her, and put a credit card on a room for the night for her somewhere, just to get her in to get a bath, or a shower. I could have done that easily, but I didn't. And so when I got home, that was haunting me, and that's how I wrote that song. It's like, man, I could have done it better. I could have done it better, A missed opportunity. I
Once again, you
wouldn't
got a song out of it. That it shows what a deep songwriter you are, that every experience goes into the songs.
Yeah, yeah. I don't kid myself enough to think that had I got her a roof over her head for the night and something good to eat, that she wouldn't have, you know, been trying to get that fixed, There's, you know, that's a reality, but I could have done better. And you know what? The very fact that I could have done better is what drove the song, and the reason that I wanted it done the way it was, the way we put it together. It is probably the most produced thing, and we did it during COVID, so we had a lot of file sharing going on at the time, where I got a performance and we sent it around, and with no direction really, just see what you think and see what you play on it. Came back, and then we just assembled what we liked best of all that we got back on it.
So was that always part of your idea, that it would have that tempo change?
Um, Now which one tempo change?
Isn't it The Girl on the Street where it starts slow and then
No, that's Don't Leave Me Now.
oh, okay, I'm sorry.
That's Don't Leave Me Now, which is it's a ballad and it starts banging.
Yeah. I'm sorry, I got those confused. Was
Uh,
that the original conception for that one? That
yeah, yeah, it's. I remember I was writing, I've been a liar, I've been untrue, and it's like, oh God, woe is me. All right, I'm okay. I'm gonna tell the freaking truth about myself. And I got kind of as far as I got, and I just started banging on the guitar out of frustration, I think, at the time, and which led me to, oh, I can do this. There's a way out of this. There's a way out of these doldrums.
hmm. You're mentioning how Joe Henry, that he would really encourage you to come up with your best work. And I always remember at the song camp, Mark Montijo had a song called History. And you were listening to everyone's song, and you're often a harsh critic, but because of that, when you said something was good, you knew that you meant it. And I always remember it was one of the most touching moments after he played a song, you just said, congratulations. It was so beautiful.
Yeah.
And I've talked to him ever since. That meant so much to him. And that
Yeah.
song deserved it too, I thought.
Yeah, good. Yeah. Well, yeah, I would never intentionally be cruel to, someone who aspires to write songs, even if they're not even thinking that they want to do it professionally. And I do these song camps, as you know, and you can't really teach songwriting. You can only encourage songwriting. But one thing that even the most relaxed, most least, what's the word I'm looking for? Ambitious songwriter is like you gotta learn some sort of self-editing. It's your tool number one at some point is whether or not you can edit yourself. And once you that becomes part of your toolkit, you can get somewhere. If you can, as I keep up with a few of the songwriters, and they get in touch with me and talk about their toolkit and about their self-editing, and I really find that some when they're most pleased with themselves when they've elbowed some big uh, metaphor out of there and come up with something that's more uh, soulful, or and more in service of the narrative of the song.
Mhm. Well, I thought it was really inspiring and great that you really encourage artistry and the craft of songwriting, and that there's a reason for rhymes and crafts and metaphors. It's not a random thing that we need to put in, but those add so much to a song. And I thought it was a really important lesson that you were saying, you go for a real rhyme, even if you don't get one, aiming for it is gonna lead you places.
Yeah,
That was a really important lesson.
soft rhymes. Soft rhymes will kill a good song. It's oftentimes soft rhymes. You realize if you rhyme blue with take your picture a pic blue with Ben. It's like, wait a minute, you just lost the beauty of what the listener wants to hear subconsciously. Bad illustration, but
No, but it's true. It just sounds wrong if you don't have a rhyme in certain
well,
places.
yeah, where it sounds like you didn't try hard enough to get there. I'm gonna cobble this together because I'm gonna play it for my friends and they're gonna think I'm cool. When 3 more days of work, you would have had something that might stand them on their head.
It's interesting you use the word cobble them together, that some of it is just inspired and pure and the rest is cobbling. But a savvy songwriter like you, even your cobbling, you probably get it to the place where it all seems, pretty.
If you can cobble long enough that you can get it to sound like it came in a burst of inspiration, you're doing your job.
Yeah, that's it. Huh?
Yeah, and trust me, I spend a lot of time cobbling, and it's occasionally, some I don't do it much, but some people, get in touch and I want to try writing. I want to write with Rodney. Is he open? I said, yeah, come out. Usually young ones, and I usually say, I said, come around and say, hey, yeah, let's see what we can do. Let's write 10 or 12 songs and we might get one or two good ones. You'd be surprised at how quickly the color goes out of, of an enthusiastic young songwriter.
It's like a
But
lot of work suddenly, huh?
yeah, that's what it is. You want to write some songs with me, then sometimes they take 30 years.
Those are good lessons. You say you can't teach songwriting, but there is a lot of wisdom you've acquired in other songwriters that you can really share with people. I thought Alan Shamblin was really wonderful at that as well.
Oh yeah, well, Alan is a he's an elevated soul in the world. He's Christ-like and kind and beautiful. You know, and an emissary of pure love and presence. And mind you, he's got an edge. You know, it's like a great balance there between the two. Such a pure, sweetheart of a guy with an edge on him. With a with a dagger clutch between his teeth when it comes to writing those really good lines.
That's a good way of putting it. Well, one of the things the songwriting camp does is just to meet a famous songwriter like you or Rodney, I mean, or Bernie Taupin, and just see, well, that's a real person. It's so great. And Alan Shamblin said, yeah, I guess he came from the same town you did, and he said we swam in the same lake. So if he could do it, I could do it. It suddenly seemed possible because he saw you doing it.
Yeah, we did. I wish I'd have known him. He told me that he was parking cars for a while, and I was going in somewhere, and he parked my car. And I said, "Oh, Alan," I said, and by now he was like, a happening songwriter. I said, "Alan, did I tip you?" And he said, "Yeah, you tipped me well." And I said, "Oh, thank God. I'd have hated it if I'd have stiffed you." So
Yeah,
it'd be nice, you know what? It'd be nice on the way up because you're going to come back down, whatever that thing is.
right.
And there's a guy from the same town as me who's killed it, man, and for all the right reasons.
Exactly. And even the way he said it was like a song lyric. He said, we swam in the same lake. I love that. So just to wrap it up, it gives me hope when I hear you talk and hear your music that artistry and songwriting still matters. Sometimes we hear these really great hit records that are really interesting records, but they're not always songs, what we consider real songs. Do you
Yeah.
find that? And do you think real songs will continue?
Well, yeah, in the hands of certain people, yeah, yeah. It's certainly I find it, Anais Mitchell. Anais Mitchell.
Mhm.
You know who she is? Like, yeah, I discovered her, and it's like, ooh, yeah, really, really fine stuff, and
Really?
that's a way I felt when I landed on Billie Eilish.
Yes.
I thought, yeah, this is this is not anything that my DNA and my time on Earth and where I come from would not align in any way where I would create this thing that she created with her brother. But I recognize it as coming from that magic place.
Yes.
And that's the way I felt about Anais Mitchell.
I
And
agree about Billy and Phineas and that they have melodies. Their parents were playing them Beatles and great songs, so
yeah,
their music is melodic, and
yeah.
it makes a big difference.
Yeah, and it's out there, It's they're doing it. I think uh, you got to go off road, mostly around Nashville, to find it. It's the mainstream doesn't. Mainstream radio is we all know what it is. It's there to sell ads, and the music that they choose to put on there while they're getting to their next ad that they sell cannot take away from, their ad campaign overall. So, you want to, if you try to pull together a song, you know, take your pick, if you try to pull together Pancho and Lefty now, and you're going to, and the programmers are out there, they're going to program this in among all these ads. Well, Pancho and Lefty is going to jar you into thinking in a different way, in a critical, you're going to, that your critical thinking is going to come into play because you have to consider what's being said and sung at you, which completely negates the hypnosis that radio needs to sell their ads. So I understand that, and more power to them. I don't blame them. They're trying to make a living, and there are folks who can make an art out of filling in those blanks. It'll never be me, and most of the people that I wind up listening to or discovering and feeling really kinship with, I'm not going to find them on the radio, you know. Um, so I don't listen. So I just dig around and it comes to me.
It seems people, even, kids, my son's 20, 21, when they do hear a real song with the melody, they say, hey, that's good. They're
Yeah,
not used to it as much, but they like it,
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you're still writing great songs, and congratulations on this album. It's really
Thank you,
wonderful.
thank you, Paul. I appreciate that. Yeah, thank you for giving me some time.
Oh,
I
anytime.
want,
It's great always to talk to you, Rodney.
yeah, it's like I want people to hear this music, it's or these songs or um, my intention and the work that I put into it, is I purposely don't over exaggerate my importance on the scene, but the work is important to me, and so I wanted to get all the help that it can. So thank you.
Thank you. I mean, you stressed that at your camp when the first thing you did was put a Dylan song up and a Leonard Cohen song. I said, this is about art and meaning as well as, being a commercial songwriter.
Yeah.
Thank you for keeping up that fight.
Yes, sir. Okay, brother.
All right, be well. Rodney.
All right. And Elizabeth, we needed you.
Oh, I'm sorry. I've been here. I just always keep my camera off so that you guys, can feel more like you're connecting.
We'll
But
just stare
Yeah.
at you otherwise.
Well, that's kind of you, but it would have been I would have been happy for you to chime in.
next time I'll know.
Okay. All right. All right, everybody be well. And
Take care, Rodney.
I feel better having done this than I did when I sat down. So that's a good thing,
I'm
isn't it?
glad.
Oh, that's wonderful.
I feel
Yeah.
good too. Thank you, Rodney.
Okay, bud. I'll see
Thanks,
you later.
Elizabeth. Okay. Bye, guys.
Bye-bye.